as a leader is like, just control what you can control.
Real. It became a thing that's tangible.
For being adopted, not knowing who your parents are, never meeting your mother, not understanding why you were adopted and what that actually means. And then
consciously kind of like, I don't think I can do that.
I just want to save somebody's life, man. And we're live. What's up, dude?
What's going on, man?
Another day in paradise, man. I just want to, I kind of want to jump right into this conversation because I've been thinking about it all week. Today's episode for all of you guys is going to be conscious versus unconscious mindsets. What does that mean? What does that mean to you and why it's important? We chatted back a little bit back and forth on it. I've got your notes right in front of me. So the first thing that I've got for you, man, like what is, in your opinion, what is the conscious versus subconscious mindset?
So for me, outside of just like a technical book definition, very simply, conscious mindset is what you are actively focused on, what you're paying attention to at any given moment in time. So when we're here, right, I'm consciously talking to you, listening to you, paying attention to what I'm saying. In here, I'm focused on what we're talking about, that kind of stuff. So it's what you're actively aware of. Subconscious is all the stuff that's happening that you are not actively aware of. And it doesn't have to be specifically related to thoughts or internal voices, but there's a lot of things that are habits that we no longer pay attention, that our body puts on cruise control, and we repeat those actions and habits all over again. That becomes subconscious because you no longer have to think about it and it becomes reactive. So I personally think of a conscious mindset, what you're actively paying attention to and working on, and subconscious, the thing that you're not aware of or become reactive to when it's not intentional.
Just for our listeners out there, let's jump right into this. So why the fuck does conscious and unconscious, subconscious even matter? So for those of you who might be on this journey of self-awareness, and for me, taking a step back, 2 years ago, like I wasn't even thinking about conscious and subconscious mindsets at all. And if somebody even mentioned that in a conversation, I'd be like, what the fuck? What the fuck is this? Is this some type of loony shit? Right. So I think, as the past 10 years have kind of evolved, I think a lot more conversation might be had around this topic of conversation. But why the fuck is this important?
Okay, so I got a quote and it works perfectly to this. And about 2 years ago was when I heard this quote, read it. I don't even remember where it came from, but it was one of those things that I heard one time and stuck. And it is, until you make the subconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, by a gentleman named J.C. Jang. That is my complete thought about it. That's like the easiest way to fully understand exactly what this is and where this came from. And I don't remember where I heard it. I really don't. But this is it's literally that, man. That is it. So everything that you do subconsciously, it's your habits. It's built into your mind, your programming, what you do on a day-to-day basis. It literally controls you.
Fantastic quote. I love that quote. How the hell, or what, or not even how the hell, but when was the moment that hit you? Like, what did that feel like? And then what was your next step? Like, I mean, it's one thing to read the quote, right? And you're like, okay,
Yeah.
I saw it on a TikTok reel. I scroll up and down. That's a good quote. It gives you goosebumps. But then you scroll on to the next topic of conversation, right? So like, when did that, you read it, you heard it, whatever you did, but when did you really think about it? And what did that kind of like, describe to me that moment? What did it feel like to you? And how did you start to change from there?
The change happens over time as I start realizing that I'm kind of my own worst enemy. I personally am not someone that is physically aware. There's a lot of things in terms of movements and how I stand that I may or may not pay attention to at times. And most of the time I don't pay attention to, and that becomes the subconscious thing. So for me, when I heard that, I realized that there were so many things that I stopped paying attention to, that I wasn't paying attention to through the course of learning, I guess, sales and communication and effective selling. I've realized that there's a lot of aspects of a conversation, of our interactions, of just people being people, that we literally do not pay attention to on a daily basis. And it becomes our habit and it becomes subconscious. So for me, one of the easiest example that everyone knows about is RBF, resting bitch face, right? My wife likes to call it resting motherfucker face for me specifically, but honestly, the default position that my face is in most situations is kind of just like, right? So the fact that my face rests in a position that is not what I want it to be is literally that. And that's one of the easiest examples that I have of it, but this applies to anything. How I approach a conversation, how I say hi to someone, how you look at someone, how you react to a comment that someone says, or um, literally anything that's a reaction that you don't want or doesn't serve the direction that you're trying to go is probably a programmed subconscious action that is was learned, and you don't have any idea that that's what your reaction is. So the RBF, the resting bitch face, there's a lot of people that sit there, but you learn that as a human by watching everyone else around you. So if all the people that you hang around are all the time, that's exactly what you're going to be. Whereas if you hang out with someone that is bright and smiley and just more engaged in like, what they're doing with their face, you become that way. So it's a lot, man. So it's not just like, I don't have a one way to put it or a one thing that I've learned or how I learned it. It's just like everything, literally everything is controlled by the subconscious as long as you're not thinking about it. Anything that's reactive, anything that you don't pay attention to, anything that you don't actively choose, which is how it ties back into the conscious portion of it. Because when it becomes conscious, now you can actually pay attention to it. So if I want to be not resting motherfucker face, I have to focus on smiling and I have to think about it actively to then smile. So whenever I go into a room or whenever I am just walking around, making sure that I have a smile. And that's when you become able to control it and able to kind of direct what happens.
No, man, that makes sense. I can think back, dude. You said it. It's a lot for me. It's a lot when you think about you're a product of your environment. So how you're raised, what you watch and consume from a content perspective, whether it's movies, whether it's music, whether it's the family conversation and their points of view and their perspective, right, on positive or some people are considered optimistic, some people are considered pessimistic, or they like to call themselves realists, right? Like, I'm not pessimist, I'm a realist. So when you're raised around that environment, you're preconditioned, and you don't even know it yet. So then that's where, like, hey, you're just like your father or you're just like your mother. You eat just like your father, right? Why? Because you become what you see. Man, it takes years to undo that for sure. Like, I can't see myself. When you become aware of this, it's not as easy as, oh, I'm going to just start changing how I think, right? Because it's so ingrained into your DNA. You have to essentially reprogram the software that you've been downloaded to and privy to. And then over time, it just continues to compound, right? You get, software update 16.034, and it just goes on over time, man. So for you to undo all of that, to figure out the root cause is extremely hard, number one. And then number two, the subconscious piece of it is the shit that you're not even aware of that you do subconsciously because it becomes so automatic, right? Your body's just moving, autonomously, and you're just like, shit, I didn't realize I even did that. And a lot of times it takes like Heather saying something to me, and I'm like, damn it, I'm not right. I'm right, whatever. No, that's not what I meant, or that's not what I said, but it's exactly how it came across, right? And it comes back from perception is reality. So like, you may have not intended it that way, but it came out that way for the other person to see it, or they view you as that. So good point, man. So let me ask you this. Which one's more powerful in your opinion? Is it subconscious mindset or is it conscious mindset, and why?
Subconscious.
Why?
Cruise control. That is literally cruise control. So the thing is, there is this kind of, your subconscious is essentially your self-talk and your feedback loops, right? So there's a lot of things that you do in reaction to stuff. And the thing is, when you're not aware of them, it leads your life because it just leads it in a negative direction or away from the direction that you want it to go. You can't control everything in your subconscious, but once you become aware of it and you're able to create habits that stop the thing that you don't want, those positive habits then become your good reaction, right?
Right.
So it's not about making everything that's subconscious conscious. It's about like programming the things that you want to do or doing the things that you want to do and just kind of having them automatically happening, right? So when you want things to happen and then you can get it to be ingrained subconsciously and make that your reaction, that's when you have power, because you don't always have to think about it, but you now know that this action that's happening is what I want. So I think it's the subconscious. I think we consciously have to get it there by doing it actively. But once it becomes subconscious, that's when it takes control and it takes you in whatever that direction is. The thing is, if you're not aware of it, you don't know what that direction is, right? It's someone else's directions. Like we're people of habit. So we're people that like look around in a room and whatever's there is what we perceive, and our body subconsciously tries to mirror and mimic that. But if you're consciously aware of what you want to do, strangely enough, other people kind of flow towards you and will mirror and mimic whoever has the strongest energy. So you need to be consciously aware of what you're doing, but everything else is kind of subconsciously matching whatever it is once you are aware of it. I mean, honestly, like the resting motherfucker face, if I don't know, I don't pay attention to it, man. But now, like, I can feel it. Like I can literally feel it when I'm just sitting there and my face just kind of like, and I'm
Right.
like, God damn, and I have to try to like smile, and I'm still working on it. It takes forever, but like it has to be subconscious, but it has to be what you want it to be, which is that's the thing that's kind of
That's a
weird.
whole
If it's
nother,
not
that's a
what you
whole nother
want,
conversation as well, dude. That's a
so let
whole
me
nother
ask you this.
conversation.
And you mentioned that Heather mentions stuff to you, but is there any other way that you become aware of that subconscious self or whatever it is that you're doing that you're not fully aware of? Besides somebody telling you, is there anything else that you realize? Is there any other way it clicks for you?
Through other people, I think, when I walk with other people, I can see maybe some of my tendencies or behaviors through other people where I'm just like, and I may not be aware of it right off the rip, but like as time goes on, I'll watch somebody else do something. I mean, I'll be in the middle of Starbucks or something like that, grabbing a cup of coffee or, lunch with a coworker, whatever it may be. And then I'll watch something and I'll be like, oh shit, I did that this morning. Right. And I'm just like, damn it. So I become a lot of time for me, I become aware of things after the fact, not in the moment. Um, all the time per se. Like sometimes I'm aware of it in the moment. I'm like, I probably shouldn't have said that. And I think it's more or less the environment that you're in, man, is probably the most critical thing for me. And that's one of the things that I was going to talk about later on. But like, just depending on the environment that I'm in, I can control it to an extent. But if I'm around people who, let's say I'm around, somebody who's above my pay grade, for example, and they're just not self-aware on the same level that we're discussing and or just don't believe what we believe in that regard from a self-help, quote unquote, conversation,
Yeah.
I'll become conditioned in that conversation because of
Yeah.
I'm kind of going along with the flow of the conversation, which I shouldn't, right? So a lot of times, like for the longest time when I would sit around people, man, like I would entertain conversations and I would talk to people all the time and I'd have a dialogue. The more progress that I've got in my mindset, subconscious versus conscious, being self-aware and trying to grow myself to another level, I've stopped talking. I just don't talk to people anymore. And it's almost ashamed to even say that just because most people aren't passionate about this type of conversation like you and I are. But then the other side of it, it's just like, I don't even want to go down that road, man, because it's, if I'm walking with a VP or something like that and they're not on that same level and it's just like, it just becomes almost like a mockery and or, oh, is that another one of your self-help quotes, right? And granted, you have to be consciously aware of the environment that you're surrounding yourself in and you can control that, right? For the most part. The other side of it is like I'm still in a work environment to where I can't control who I necessarily associate with specifically, if they're my
Yeah.
boss or they're, a VP or a senior VP, whatever it may be. So, I just kind of go along with the flow, but I just don't dialogue around it. I'm aware of it. I catch it later on. I'm like, I shouldn't have said that. I fell into the trap of the culture, the pop culture, whatever you want to call it, to where I just like, I become the victim again, where I'm like, no, I control that, right? Or I can think that way. I can change this. So I'll catch it. I'm aware of it. I think about it constantly. And the end game for me is to, it is to have very sleek environment around me to where I can be 100% genuine in the dialogue around the self progression. Does that make sense? It's probably a rant, but
No, actually, I do have a question. So I think, I don't know if this is particularly your example, but one of the things that's kind of subconscious that people just do for fun because it's how conversations are had nowadays in certain situations is the complaining, to where somebody will see something and immediately complain about it, not in a I'm going to do anything about it way, but uh, this isn't the way I would do it, or I'm not satisfied with this. And that's just the end of it. It's literally just a complaint that is baseless. There's no action. There's nothing that's going to come from it. It's literally someone saying, hey, this is something that I dislike, just to make it known that they dislike it. That I don't like personally. And I think that's something that is programmed into certain conversations at work with certain people that you try to avoid. How do you deal with that? How do you get away from that? Or how do you not put yourself in that situation? Because if enough people do it around you, you then start to do it, right? Cancer grows. And we're not talking like physical cancer, we're talking employee cancer. That starts to spread, and that's a type of attitude that's terrible for team building. It's terrible for literally everything. So how do you deal with that level of complaint? How do you take yourself away from it? How do you make sure you're not adding to it?
that's a great question, actually. That's something that I can partially control. It just depends on what you lead specifically. And then the other side of it, it's not necessarily within your control. So I'll give you an example. So obviously, I'm in the sales business, right? Of some way, shape, or form. I'm in the retail sales business, and the macro environment's been extremely tough. Post COVID, when you look at what happened, consumerism, peaked a lot during 2020 to 2022. People stayed inside, they spent more money, which artificially inflates the retail segment of the business, right? People are staying inside, they're spending more money on products, electronics, home improvement, stuff like that. And then a lot of that was also created off the stock market. So people made a lot more money. They took equity out of their house, yada, 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 right? So now here we are post-COVID. And of course, everything is going to be correcting itself. So everybody says, oh, we're in a down economy. No, we're not in a down economy. We're in a correction of spending, but so everybody's like, oh, we're in a bad economy. We're in a recession. We're losing money, blah, 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 blah. And it aggravates me when you look at that, because there's some things that are within your control and there's some things that are not within your control. So let's, for 2 years, most organizations crushed their sales target, just absolutely crushed it, double-digit comp growth, etc. And now we're restabilizing, spending is shifting. We're, instead of spending on good, people are spending on vacations now. They're getting out of the house. They're going to travel to another country, whatever it is. So you have to write your business. And of course, naturally, the point of any business is to grow it, but you're going to have a year or two that starts to trend downwards, right? The housing market, that. What aggravates me in a conversation is people start to complain, oh, I'm missing sales budget, I'm not getting any customers. We all know that. Every retail sector is posting negative comps right now. It's public data. Very few people are winning, and there's some that are doing a better job than others. And the biggest conversation I have with myself as a leader is like, just control what you can control. I can't control the amount of customers that are walking in the building specifically. There's some ways that I can do that, but I can control the interaction between the one that's right in front of me. And I can leverage that to the best of my advantage, right? To where, if you're getting, 100 baseballs thrown at you, and you're just trying to make contact, it doesn't matter where that contact goes. You're just trying to make contact. But then if I'm like, all right, you're only going to get 20 pitches right now. You're going to get a little bit more time in between each pitch. So that means you're going to make sure that your stance is good, your grip is great, you're focused, you're paying attention to whether or not the pitcher is throwing fastballs, curveballs, sliders. Like, you're trying to understand that cadence so you can better react to it. And you can maximize that contact to have a lot better power, right? So that's the way I look at the complaining aspect of it. It's like, I don't like to listen to the complaints, man. It's not because you always hear that, like, oh, you stop complaining. Like, I really don't. And I become numb to it, and I try to completely block it out, where you could talk to me and all I see are your lips moving. I literally will zone out. And I'll tell you that straight up. And I've gotten more blunt as time goes on. Like, all I heard were complaints. Like, I've literally zoned out, because there's still 50 things that you can control that you're choosing to neglect because people want the easier way out. Like, everybody was lovely and winning, but they weren't winning. I call it winning unaware. They were just crushing it because a shit ton of balls were coming at you, and you're hitting as many balls as you can. Doesn't matter if it's a grounder to first base or up to the pitcher, you're just hitting it. And you're like, oh, I'm making contact. Yeah. Right. But like, now it's like, this is a time to have like I'm going to sell you the car. I'm going to get you the upgraded leather seats, the heated steering wheel. Like, you're still going to get people who are going to buy and spend with you. You just got to figure out where to plant your fucking seeds. And that's the conversation that I'd like to have with people. And that's what aggravates me about that, about the complaining mindset, is that it's just, I'm so tired of hearing people complain when there's still so much to be controlled, man. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I just don't
Absolutely.
listen to it, to be honest with you. I really don't. And do I still complain? Yes. I find myself complaining every now and then. I'm like, shit, why am I complaining? I can still control this. I can still be better in this environment. I catch it. I'm self aware. I don't catch it in the moment all the time, but it definitely frustrates the living shit out of me, especially in the job that I am. It's like there's still so much to be controlled. But, I had a conversation with my group of leaders this week, and, I'm a Ford person, but I'm also a Henry Ford person. And one of the quotes that he has is, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Fantastic quote. So if you say you can't do something, you're absolutely going to succeed in that mindset. And that's what frustrates me about the complaining mindset. And that's also like, that's a subconscious tactic that's been built in based on the environment that you're in. Right.
It is. It really is. So, a question that I do have is based on the situation that you're in, right? Your subconscious is somewhat controlled by your environment to a certain extent. What actions are you taking now to control that, right? Is it not talking to certain people? Is it changing the conversations that you have? Is it changing the direction of a conversation if it starts to go a certain way? Like, what are you doing to control your own subconscious when you're interacting with different people that don't have the same level of control or aren't trying to achieve the same thing that you are?
Just depends on the person, man. Like, if there's certain people that I just feel like are not vibing right with the energy to try to control that conversation, I just ignore it and I'll just listen. I'll let them vent, because a lot of people need to vent. And I get
Yeah.
it. There's a human part of what we're in from an emotional perspective, to where sometimes we just need to vent because you've just been beat up for so long, that you just got to let it out. So depending on the person's emotional vibe and they just need to vent, I'll let it happen. If the vibe isn't there and I just don't feel like it's even worthy of a conversation, I just go back to like listening to something else in my head, and I'll just move on, and I'll just, yep, yeah, you're right. Oh, that sucks, type vibe. Cause I'm like, I'm not going to control that conversation with that individual. And then I guess the last thing that I would say is, if I feel like either I don't know the person very well, or the person's open, to some coaching of some sort and or conversation or dialogue, then I'll have the same conversation I'm having with you. I'm like, listen, man, it is what you think it is. So let's have some dialogue around some certain things that you can change. And I try to give them some words of wisdom. It just depends, man. For so long, I used to recommend books and content to people, podcasts and things to listen to, but you just find so many people who just think it's all like witchy bullshit. When you talk about self-awareness and conscious versus subconscious mindsets and books and podcasts to read, I think social media has done a very bad job, inadvertently, subconsciously,
Yeah.
at glamorizing people's success. So when you start to give people piece of advice, they're like, oh, it's never going to happen for me, or that's not me, I'm not rich, or I'm not wealthy. It's easier said than done, right? Or it's easier to be happy and or successful if you've got millions of dollars in the bank. Like, but nobody understands the grind that got them there. But I think, speaking out of both sides of my mouth, I think the other side of it is, like, we know that most successful people have been through a bunch of shit. If you look at, like, how much wealth has been generational versus self-created, a majority of wealth is self-created. Very, very, I don't remember the exact stat. So, and there's probably, conflicting articles that speak to that, but it's like less than 10%, anywhere between 10 to 15% is generational wealth, or probably lower than that, that you've inherited. So like, we all know subconsciously that these people came from rags to riches. We hear it every day in the sports media, stuff like that, but nobody
Yeah.
connects the dots of like, hey, that can be me. Right. So I try to give my advice where I can, man, but a lot of times it'll fall on deaf ears, unfortunately. Right.
So check this out. For a kind of subconscious example of us as humans being reactive to things and completely unaware of it. Because at some point, like for you and I, the subconscious thing became real. It became a thing that's tangible, a thing that we can work on, a thing that you can change, a thing that will kind of get you in the direction that you want to go. For us, that doesn't happen for everyone. But I was reading a book, What Happened to You, from Oprah. And there is an example of literally the things that happen to you in life build who you are. It's a book generally about subconscious reactions, environment, and how that plays a role in our development, literally from a child. There's a lot into it, but there's one specific example that I was actually talking to my mom about the other day that I wanted to mention here. And there was a child that was abused by his father, taken away from the parent, and put into the foster care system. They had some issues with foster care parents, were removed and went to another place. And then they were in this class. They started doing better. They were out of the abusive environment. They were doing good. They were doing well in school. Teacher changes. And now the child starts to act out again with a different instructor. And Oprah wrote this book with somebody else. I don't remember who they are, but they work on behavioral sciences and they study different patients. And this is one of the patients, and they were studying this child's reactions to the teacher after being removed from the abusive environment, after getting more of whatever your actual needs are, going back to school, getting filtered in, and actually, doing well, and gaining confidence, and just understanding that not everyone's going to abuse you. There was one particular teacher that this child had an issue with, and they were just not listening in class. And there wasn't anything physical. They had no reason to do it. It was literally just an instructor, and they didn't click. Well, looking further into it, it turns out that the father used Old Spice. So this kid was abused by someone that used Old Spice. The teacher also used Old Spice. The only connection between that teacher and that abusive parent was the cologne that they used. But that was enough for that child to start pulling away and have a fight reaction to a teacher that wasn't doing anything. And it was only until they had a meeting between teacher and parent where this person that was working with the child smelled it and realized it. The kid didn't realize it. No one had any way of knowing. This person realized that they both had strong Old Spice cologne. And they tested it afterwards. And it turns out that when there was Old Spice cologne involved, this child had negative reactions. So, literally reacting to something, whatever it is, if something pisses you off and you've ever gone back and you don't know why, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a reason for it. It may just be that you are subconsciously unaware of that reason. And it's crazy that that's a thing that we have the ability to do, but don't have any control over. Like, how many times do you go into a situation where someone's had a very negative, reactive answer to something, whether that be an easy conversation, whether that be in relationships, whether that be a comment where somebody explodes way past what's necessary for that situation, and there's no explanation for it. Like, it literally could be you as an individual, if you're the one getting attacked. It literally could be just that's their programmed reaction to stuff. That's how their parents reacted to stuff. That's how their friends in their group react to things. And it has literally nothing to do with what that individual reacting may or may not actually want, because I'm sure that as a boss per se, or as a leader, you've had somebody react very negatively to you, and all you're trying to do is give them input or advice or better whatever the situation is. You're not trying to fire, you're just trying to help in some way, shape, or form. And you've got a very not helpful reaction from it. And it has nothing to do with like us. Like, has that ever happened to you? Have you ever had anything similar to that where like this is completely unjustified for what's happening right now?
Absolutely. Actually, I want to say, if I understand the question correctly, you're referring to, like, have you ever had somebody have a poor reaction in front of you and you find out what caused it was a past traumatic event from previously? Is that what you're asking?
It doesn't even have to be a past traumatic event, just like something that it didn't make sense. I mean, I know the answer is yes, then everyone's had it, but like, have you had an experience that you can recall where you had someone just overreact to whatever it is that the
100%.
situation was?
Oh, dude, absolutely. I think, God, that's extremely hard to pick up. I think most people become extremely reactionary. So when shit like that does happen, they don't think through why that person reacted that way. But I can tell you right now, there was an individual, and I won't name his name, that I hired. It was probably about 2 years ago. Extremely temperamental, extremely angry, extremely uncoachable, right? Interviewed very well, enough to get the job. I just remember, like, man, okay, the guy works hard, and every time something would happen, you would sit down with him and have a conversation. He would just lose it, extremely defensive. And I think, and I could unpack this in like relationships, dude. You start to date, you start to get married, stuff like that. Um, Most of the time, what you're dealing with is somebody's prior experience. So when they react because of that PTSD that they've got from a prior workplace. And turns out, in this specific example, I was having a conversation with them, and it was getting really heated, right? And of course, I was getting a little bit upset and frustrated as well, because in my mind, I'm like, dude, I've never done anything bad to this guy before. Like, I'm legitimately trying to help this conversation. And then he kept on going and going. And ultimately, what happened is he had a prior experience at a prior workplace where he didn't get paid and he got done dirty, right? And this is particularly, popular in certain pockets of the country where, depending on who you talk to, it becomes like, are you racist? Or are you prejudiced around a certain conversation? So there's always that inferiority. And I don't blame anybody for being that way because they have a past experience. So he brings it up and he tells me that, his prior boss was racist and he could feel it and you could hear the passion and the emotion in his voice. So, it was legit. Then, he proceeds to tell me that he wasn't getting paid properly. His paychecks were always jacked up. And every time he went back to him, to try to get it corrected, it was always a problem. But he had to continue to do what he had to do because he had bills to pay. And this was during COVID. So it was hard to find a job during COVID, as it was in certain pockets, just based on what you're experienced of. And it clicked and it dawned on me, right? In the conversation, I'm like, listen, man, for me, it was like, have I or we ever done anything to you that has made you feel this way? And I need you to be honest with me. And this only works if you're honest. So we went down those series of questions like, have we shorted you any money on your paycheck? Have we not given you any hours? Have we poorly communicated to you? And I was trying to be as genuine as possible to understand. And he's like, no, 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 no. Right. All through the problems. I said, so then why are you yelling and treating us poorly right now? Like, why is that okay? And it clicked to him for a second. And it was like, you're right. I'm just very protective. I'm really sheltered and I'm putting a bubble around myself because I don't want to be taken advantage of again. I said, you're not wrong in that regard. Like, I get it. Play defense and how you protect yourself and make sure that you're happy 100%. But like, I haven't done anything to you, nor is anybody on my team. So why are we getting treated this poorly? And that was an eye-opening conversation. Now, long story short, it changed the conversation for about 3 months. And then he reverted back to who he was previously. Right. But now I fully understood why he acted the way he did. I tried to give him advice. I tried to give him some podcasts to listen to. I tried to do something to find a way to communicate with the gentleman just because we were trying to be genuine. He didn't change. Ultimately, the relationship terminated, 6 months later. Right. And that's unfortunate, but it made me feel bad. I didn't even do anything, but I felt bad and guilty for this individual. And the way he felt, because that's not cool. And how often does that happen in every segment, whether it's a work-related relationship or a personal relationship, right? So I absolutely have had that. The learning point for me was like, you've got to start looking through. If people act poorly, there's a reason for it. There's a 100% reason for it, whether it was the way they were raised, they have a father, they didn't have a father, they have a mother, they didn't have a mother. Poor experience, they're working 3 jobs, they're going through something personally or emotionally. So like if somebody acts out in some type of way, shape, or form that is not conducive to the environment that you're trying to create, we've got to be aware enough to try to help that individual and change that individual. That's probably the favorite part of my job as a leader. We can't change everybody or fix everybody, but like we've got to think through that. And too often or not, I find many people, leaders in business, that will try to write somebody off because they don't see that side. They don't want to give this person a chance. They don't want to be the reason why this person could succeed, because if they go to another place, it's likely they're going to have another shitty experience. And that shitty experience is going to continue to compound the beliefs that they already have subconsciously and why they feel the way they do. And ultimately will shape that young lady or that young man's career for the next 10 or 20 years until they become self-aware, if they become self-aware. Does that make sense?
How do you feel working on self-awareness to a certain extent? Because like, I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, we're never going to be perfect, but we can work to be more perfect. How do you feel going out into the world, interacting with a large group of individuals that are not self-aware? It's a scary thought, isn't it?
Yeah, I would take back what I said earlier, man. I think it's extremely tough. Some people just think you're fucking weird, and that's a shame. I think self-awareness is trendy right now. So I think more people are becoming self-aware. You see a lot of content on social media, but I still think that it only touches a fraction of the population. So it's extremely hard um, when there's so few people who want to be that open. And maybe one half of me thinks that maybe this person wants to be self-aware, but they don't know if you're self-aware, so they don't want to say anything about it. So they're like, I don't know if he's self-aware or not, so I don't want to look retarded, so I'm not going to have that dialogue with him because I don't want to be judged, right? And that's unfortunate too, because most people are literally just thinking about people judging them. So that's a whole nother conversation as well. And the other side of it is I'm happy that I'm here. I wish I would have found it sooner. I wish I would have found it in high school, or probably even before high school, right?
Yeah.
I think that would have changed the game and I would have succeeded at a lot faster rate. And I think the other side of that too is there's been a lot of damage. I think, my environment necessarily wasn't terrible, but I was adopted, and that's plays a lot of emotional baggage in my brain from being adopted, not knowing who your parents are, never meeting your mother, not understanding why you were adopted and what that actually means. And then as my parents who adopted me got divorced like 2 years later, that brings a whole nother dynamic. So there was a lot of things in my environment that weren't conducive to me being successful, but it also put me in the position where it alienated me as well. Like I alienated myself and I kind of stood back a little bit and kind of wasn't connected to certain people. Because one thing I will say when I was younger is that I had like a really strong belief that I was going to do something with my life, even though I didn't know what that meant. And even though people told me that wasn't the case, because statistically I wasn't the best academic, I always got C's and B's, an A occasionally here or there. I didn't do well with authorities specifically. I was a class clown. I got in trouble a lot. I was extremely athletic and I played ball, a lot growing up. And that was a way I got into it. But I knew when I was a teenager, man, that I was going to do something, but there was just too many outside influences that dictated my mind. So I'm partially thankful for that because it shaped me into where I'm at. But the other side of it is it did take a little while. Like, am I really going to be successful? Because there was one point in time in my head where like I've always wanted to be tattooed, and I can just remember like you're not going to be anything. I was tattooed before tattoos became super popular. Now they're trendy again, and even at the grocery, mom is driving her Toyota Sienna, getting a little butterfly sleeve now. So I was like, hey, you're not going to be successful if you do that. And I'm like, why not? And that's not my parents' fault for thinking that way. They're a product of their environment as well. And that's how they were taught and trained. And that's what their beliefs were. I completely understand that. Right. But there was a time where I didn't think that I was going to make it out of that mindset. And it took my wife helping me a lot. And it also took the two of us going through some really shitty relationship pieces where we shouldn't be here right now, but we just made a decision that we were gonna, I don't want to be corny or cliche, but like we're not gonna feel this way. There's too much in life to feel this way, to accept my fate and this is the best it's gonna be. And there's just too much out there for us to not want to be better. So a lot of it was her and I just wish I was more self-aware. And I also wish that more people would be more open about their journey to being self-aware. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So I got a couple. I have actually just one question to kind of finish this off to see if we can pass it forward to other people. And that is, what are you working on to better yourself in the subconscious sense? What are you consciously aware of that you're using to better yourself subconsciously? And what's the two things that you're working on that are actively the most prominent things? So two biggest things that you're working on to change subconsciously, and then what are you kind of doing to address those things? And I'll answer this question as well.
If I had to put it in two things, like I have 5 bullet points for the group that I
Yeah,
wanted to try to land and kind of recap
go
on.
ahead.
But like I would say the number one thing I'm trying to work on is not letting other people's fears or insecurities cast a shadow of doubt on who I am. I think that's probably extremely critical. I think other people, and that comes down to the environment that you're in, right? So if somebody says something to me like, hey, that's not possible, or it's going to take a lot of work or whatever it may be, it essentially fills your brain inadvertently, no matter what. And that could be people, it could be social media, it could be videos, whatever. So I'm trying to control what I allow in here to ensure that I don't let somebody else's fear cast any doubt or create a shadow on what I want to do. The second thing that I'm trying to work on is really just like, this is a simple hack, I think, is just meditating. and meditating around what I want, right? Just like putting a, like for example, like I've talked about it, but I want to go to Costa Rica after the kids are over 18, right? I'm not trying to say I want to be in Costa Rica with a mansion that's like $5 billion or anything like that, but I'm going to put that in my brain right now because I'm trying to create my future in that sense, and that's where I'm at. That's where I'm thinking. I'm thinking in terms to number three. I'm trying to think more presently and not about the future. So like, yes, I want to go to Costa Rica in my future, but when I speak about it, I'm trying to speak in terms of being present, like as if it's already happened or I've already made a move for it to happen. I'll give you an example. Like so little is like I'm looking at land in Costa Rica. What does that land look like? How much does it cost? Like, hey, yeah, we're gonna go. Like, I want to fly to Costa Rica next year and I want to go start looking at some land. Like I'm starting to put present dialogue in place that will create my future to where it's not like a fairy tale because most people, when they talk in terms of their future, it's like a dream. And that dream, not all dreams come true. If you want to be corny for a second. So like, I'm not dreaming. This is my reality. So I'm being more present in terms of what I look for out of my future. Does that make sense or does that sound retarded?
No, that makes perfect sense. And kind of just further a lot of that stuff. Like even when it comes to just like activities, whatever those activities are, whatever it is that you're doing or working on, like I'm going to never arrives, right? It's I am and I'm doing. Whenever that's the case, then you have to. Like you have to keep going to a certain extent. Obviously, there's a lot of people that give up on stuff and they don't keep going. But if it's in the future, it's never going to get here. And if it's in the current, now you can actually actively work on it and take steps towards it. And that's a lot of the things that we're here because of this, right? We're taking action towards something, actively working on it instead of saying, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. Here we are, we're doing it, right? Whether it's good or bad, we're here. That's literally the purpose of what we have going on. So for
100%.
me, the things that I'm working to better self-consciously is one is actually very simple, but I've realized that I've royally screwed my body over by having bad posture over the course of time. And strangely enough, posture is subconscious. If someone else next to you does not have good posture and they sit here like this all day long and you watch that, your body, by naturally looking at it, will start to do the same thing, right? So if you hang around with people that have a lot of low energy, have bad posture, you will do the same, period. If all of your friends are fat, you're gonna be fat, period, right? Because that's what you surround yourself by. Your body, naturally, as humans, we are a type of animal. We adapt to the environment that's around us. If you hang around a lot of big people, you're going to get big because your body, whether you like it or not, will subconsciously see and start to mirror the actions of everyone else around you, and you're going to do it. So either you remove yourself from that environment and you don't become fat, or you do. It's like literally the only thing that you can do. So for me, it's posture. I got a bad habit of standing crooked and just not sitting properly, and knees hurt, back hurts, certain types of pains are coming up from that posture. And as I go through and I'm actively aware of where I am, how I'm doing it, how I'm stretching, how I'm becoming more active, more mobile, my body starts to feel just like light. There's a strange burden that gets lifted, like as I fix my posture, as I become more active, as I get stronger and more flexible like I used to be. There's just a lot of mobility and like motions and positions that you put your body in on a daily basis that you don't realize are different, right? So if you go lean for something instead of like just leaning and grabbing it, you may, like, if your arm is stiff, you may just like, try to reach for it. But that's one of the things I'm actively working on. For me, it's a constant reminder of just doing it. Like it's you have to make it conscious. It has to be something that you can do. If you forget about it, you're not going to change it. And that's true for most anything that's subconscious. If you're not consciously thinking about it, it doesn't change. So it has to be prominent right here in the very front for an extended period of time. So constantly, every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes, I'm adjusting myself in the chair. When I'm standing, if I'm standing in line, making sure that I'm actually like pressing my toes into the ground and making sure that I'm not just like standing on my heels or rolling my feet in or out. It's just an active, I literally have to pay attention to it. I mentioned earlier the resting motherfucker face. I literally took a day, I think it was like 6 hours, and I just sat there like this for like 6 hours and got the muscles around my face to actually start to fall into that position naturally. Like if I hold this for 2 or 3 days and I'm actively aware that I need to be like this, it's uncomfortable and it's exaggerated. But after that X amount of time, your body will naturally just like fall into it, which is exactly what it does when you have RBF, right? You just kind of naturally just, but it's the opposite way.
Right,
It's
right.
just been programmed over time. The other thing for me, this is the big one, is kind of just the self-talk. So the voice you hear in your head is yours. It is your voice in your head. It's never gonna be someone else's. It may be in terms of a memory, but most of the time that memory goes away. It becomes your voice, and your self-talk is other people's self-talk. Either someone tried to do something and they failed and they said something about it, and now that becomes your opinion. If that happened to you when you were younger, as you grow up and you start to realize that your parents or your adults or whoever raised you had opinions on stuff when you're young, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all you do is hear them. As humans, again, we match, we mirror our environment. So if your parents had very strong beliefs about something, you probably also have very strong beliefs about the same thing. Until you sit back, make it conscious and realize that's not what I want or that's not what I believe, then you begin to change it. And as soon as something goes against what it is that you want, we actively make it happen. Like it's just as soon as like, hey, this is an action that happens, this is a reactive action that I have, I don't want that. Now it becomes something that you can actively work on.
Right.
Yeah. Once you realize it, now you can actually do it. So for me, it's the self-talk thing. And it's very simply questioning myself, period. I ask questions. The more questions I ask, the more I learn. It's absolutely crazy. But I break everything down, like why this, why that, or I'm working on breaking everything down, being honest with it. I ask, why did this happen? Why did I think this? Why do I think this? And if that thought very simply doesn't line up with where I want to go, I try to break it down and I try to break it out, get it out of the way. Um, and it's difficult, but it's honestly the only thing that I have that I can try to better myself is that self-talk loop. That's the biggest one. I know that's gonna be the biggest challenge because there's always outside influences. There's always doubt that comes in, whether that be from other people or that be from ourselves, just as you were talking about. But breaking that down and saying, no, this isn't what I want, fuck you to me, and then continuing to do whatever it is. That's probably the biggest thing that I have.
Well,
I'm
so
working on.
go back to that point real fast. I'm gonna go back to my first point. All right. Don't let other people's fears cast a shadow of doubt
Yeah,
on who or what you want. And I'll give you an example on that. So let's say you're fixing to get married. So you've got some of those who are gonna be like, oh man, that's so awesome. Happy marriage. It's gonna be a great life. And then you've got other people who are gonna say, well, good luck with that. Marriage sucks. Or
yeah,
it's terrible, or it's going to end in divorce, or like it's only going to last 10 years, or be ready to be like happy wife, happy life. And I'm like, I'm the guy that's like, well, hey, happy spouse, happy house, right? So like you've got people who from both sides of the angle, they're going to say, hey, here's your happy marriage, great job. Or hey, fuck you, you shouldn't get married. And a lot of people take that in like, oh my God, is our marriage going to fail? Statistically, 50% of marriages fail on the first marriage, right? Those are cold hard facts. How much of that was just conditioning? Some of it's also could just be not picking the right life partner, but looking at both sides of the coin, heads or tails, and allowing that to dictate who you are needs to be nixed immediately, right? And I had two more points that I wanted to make that are really quick points. I think they're super simple. You got to have a master plan. It could take 10 years for 1 year to change your entire life, right? And I've had a plan. I've hit that goal, but I've had times where I went backwards. I'm like, man, am I going to hit that goal? Right. So you've got to have a master plan. You've got to stick to that master plan. It doesn't necessarily need to be cold, hard specific. Like, hey, I'm going to drive a 1994 Toyota Supra that's lime green in color. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be that specific. Like, hey, I just want that car. Right. And then you can paint it that color later on. But have a master plan and kind of discuss that with whoever, whether it's your life partner, whether it's yourself, etc. And then I think the the fifth bullet point that I've got would just be start asking for what you want now. That's big for me. Like I'm going to start, whether I get it or not is could be up to just timing, but you got to start asking for what you want. Like if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it, right? What's that saying? A closed mouth never gets fed. So if you don't ask for what you want and at least let others know this is where you're going. Like whenever I wanted to get promoted, I've always told my boss, I want to get promoted. This is the job that I want. And it might be annoying. It might be like, hey, slow down, cowboy. Like you need to work through your process first. Like I'm not being an asshole. I'm not being egotistical. I'm just letting you know what my intentions are. That's why I came here. I came here to do A, B, and C. And if it doesn't work out, I need you to be brutally honest with me and tell me why it didn't work out. And then I'm, of course, emotionally, I'll have to figure that piece out and then I'll just build upon that. But the other side of it is if you don't ask for what you want and let it be known, you will get passed up. Just to recircle all of that real fast and just to bring it all into context quickly. Don't let other people's fear cast a shadow of a doubt on who and where you want to go. Have a master plan. Speak presently instead of speaking in terms of the future about what you're doing. It's not a dream. Make it your reality and discuss it. Start asking for what you want now, even if it doesn't happen, the time's not right. And then lastly, fill your dead time with some sort of meditation or affirmation. I know I talked about meditation earlier, but like we have a lot of dead time, and I try to use that dead time. And even if I'm going to scroll on Facebook or Instagram, I do have Instagram. So I've created my algorithm on both Instagram and YouTube for it to mirror what I like. Right now, I like Porsches. I want a 1974 Carrera. That's one of my dream cars right now. I don't know why, as I've gotten older, that's a car that I want, right? So I've got Porsche literally embedded into my algorithm, right? There's certain houses that I like and styles that I want to create. I embedded that into my algorithm. I'm working on getting more fit. So I've embedded that into my algorithm. So I've created the environment that I want based upon content. So if I am going to create time where I'm scrolling and or messing around on my phone, it is literally where I want to be from top to bottom, soup to nuts.
That is some of it, because there's a lot. Honestly,
Agreed,
kind of
man.
going off of that, there is something that's very strange, and it's a guiding principle that everyone can have, and it's somewhat the reason why we are here. Kirk and I were hanging out one day, and we came to this because I made a comment about what do you want to do, right? Period. Nothing else, no ifs, ands, or buts. Anything other than exactly what you want to do is an excuse or a reason for you to fail that has been taught to you via the subconscious. I specifically asked if you were a kid and you wanted to do something and you had no one to tell you no, you had no logic involved in your reasoning for asking for whatever it is. It doesn't have to be logical, doesn't have to make sense. You don't have to know how you're going to accomplish it at this current moment in time. What would that be? And from that question, we're now here literally right now. But in asking that question in that specific way, when you want to accomplish something, we subconsciously kind of like, I don't think I can do that, right? But when you ask a hypothetical question specifically about what you want to do without your own beliefs in the way, now you can actually fully figure out what it is that you want. And it kind of ties into your navigating principle of having a North Star. When you figure out what you want to do, you will subconsciously get there. Whatever it is that doesn't feed the direction that you want, if you really want it, your body will start to not like the things that don't get you there and start to like the things that will get you there, regardless of how it is that you put it. When you truly want something and you just let yourself want it, you'll figure it out. And that's literally why we're here. We're figuring it out.
I'd agree with that, and I think we can end on this note. For me, in this subconscious conscious mindset, like I've always wanted. What was the answer? Do you remember the answer that I gave you for that conversation? By the way,
You never actually gave me an answer. There was always a but.
there
I
was
don't
a
think you
but.
dropped
So
it.
so a long time, and this is corny as shit, and I won't hammer this one too far because it's kind of embarrassing. But like I kind of wanted to be like, I just want to save somebody's life, man, in some way, shape, or form. I wanted to change the world. Right. So if I had to remove all the obstacles, the objections, the logic, the scrutiny, the judgment, whatever it may have been, I just want to help people. I want to help people not feel like what I felt growing up. And it's not to any fault of my parents or my environment. Like there's just some things that, that we can get into in future episodes, right? But just being adopted and all that good shit just didn't feel like I fit in. It's like, man,
Yeah.
I don't want people to feel like that. A, and B, like some way, shape, or form, I just want people to be a better version of themselves, and I want to try to save the world one person at a time. Sounds corny as shit, right? But that's what I wanted to do, and that's hence why I like being a leader right now for my current job. That's what
Yeah.
truly like makes me excited, is that I could try to save one person's job or get them promoted, or I mean, whatever, right? So the podcast, I've always wanted to do a podcast, and granted, we might suck for the next couple episodes, and maybe we have one person that watches us, and maybe it's our wives, and that's it. But I just want to find a way to save somebody. There's one, if I could save one person's life or change their mindset, get them to where they want to go. That's why I wanted to do a podcast. But for too long, I let the outside noise of, and I'll give you some example of the excuses real fast. Like, like, hey, there's too many self-help podcasts out there. That was one. Like, if you've got certain people like Tony Robbins, Gary Vaynerchuk, Jocko Willink, David Goggins, Ed Milet, you got all these different people out there that are creating really, really good content, that are very sharp with their communication skills, and they've been doing it for thousands of episodes. What am I going to do? So that was one of the obstacles.
Start off with step number one.
Right. And that goes back to that corny quote, man. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Right. So that's where I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. We'll make a podcast, whether it sucks or not. I have zero expectations, for myself. I'm just happy that I'm doing it, and who knows where this is going to take me. And I can start to, again, reprogram the subconscious mindset of like, why can't it be me? Why can't it be you? Right. So that's my corny little finishing off note right there. But
No, it's a good one. Honestly, that's pretty much how our conversation went. Was, hey, just ask for it. Yeah, but I don't. Yeah, but but.
you're
But
right.
here we are,
You're right.
regardless. Honestly, one of those weird little things that I've been doing with myself is there's two justifiable reasons for most anything, and this is what I've kind of started to break things down into my mind to stop making excuses. We all do in certain way, shape, or forms. We may call it reasons, but regardless, if I break everything down into two simple things, I want to or I don't want to, any justification behind that does not matter. It's an excuse, right? Especially for the negative portion, which is I don't want to, right? So you can tell someone it is, you literally, whatever reason comes out of your mouth, it's like an excuse. I don't want to, period. End of story. I don't need a reason. I don't need a justification for it. I don't want to, end of story. Or I do want to. I don't need to back it up or have a reason or have anything that goes behind it. It would be nice if it's like an enjoyable thing, like I want to go to the park or yada yada. But I want to is enough. I don't want to is enough. I don't need to justify anything else. I don't need to explain myself further. Literally wanting to or not wanting to is significant enough to justify the decision that I'm making, whatever that is. And it's been very interesting kind of reasoning with myself, because sometimes I'll go through and I'm just like, hey, this, like, I don't want to because of this, but just because of this doesn't matter. Just I don't want to, period. End of story. That's it. It's done. Right. So that's what I've been kind of focusing on, just because we make excuses with ourselves subconsciously. Sometimes it's consciously, but I don't try to explain things past the point of necessity. Like if I don't want to is the reason, that's it. I don't need any more reason. I don't need to explain myself to anyone else. I
It's a good one.
personally was a person that I would say kind of walked on eggshells. And I don't know where it came from. It has something to do with authority. It may have come from parenting. It may have come from being an adult. But like, if I don't want to do something, like as a child, you expect a reason for it, right? You can't just not want to do something, right? Because you're kind of guided by other people. Same thing with school, same thing with literally everything as you go on through life. There's rules, regulations, there's other people's opinions. But at the end of the day, like now, when you're an adult, you kind of program that into yourself as you're growing up, because the first 10, 15 years of your life are exactly like this. But that's one of the things that I've been working to get out of. It's just simply like, I don't need to give someone a reason for anything. I don't need to explain myself to anyone unless I'm trying to help you with something. Now I have to explain the information that I'm giving you, but I don't have to explain reasons, right? They're my own. They don't have to be yours. You don't have to understand them. You don't have to care for them, whether that's good or bad. So that's one of those things that I feel like was programmed into me, is just kind of like walking on eggshells and needing to have a reason to do what I do or make it justifiable to someone else, when that's not the case, man. It's just like, if I want to, I want to. If I don't, I don't. Like, I get it. When you have a partner, that's different, because now it's a decision between two people. But when it's something specifically for you, like you want it or you don't, and that's it. So that's one of those things that is subconscious in terms of the reaction that I have or providing reason for, that I'm working on getting out. But it's enough, man. It doesn't have to have a reason. It doesn't have to make sense to anyone else but you. If it makes sense to you, do it. If it doesn't make sense, don't. Like, it is what it is, right? Now, things are going to happen based upon that, based on other people's reactions or whatever other person interacts with it. But at the end of the day, all that matters is what's in here, what's in here, and what you want to happen out in the world.
I couldn't agree more, my friend. Listen, I've enjoyed the conversation today, and I definitely took a bunch of notes as well. So I really look forward to next time.
I mean,
So until next time, bro.
peace out.